everybody. I just want to thank you all for joining us on this occasion. If you're here with me in the United States, good morning. And for all of you joining from around the globe, thank you so much for being part of this discussion on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and the 69th Forum of the Commission on the Status of Women. My name is Farihah Ahmed, and I am the founder and director of RoVena, an NGO working toward educational equity for refugees. Equity, of course, involves multiple intersectional lenses, and I'm delighted that today we will be discussing educational equity as it relates to gender, specifically for refugee women and girls, from a variety of international perspectives. I would like to thank the United Nations and the NGO Commission organizers for putting together this critical initiative convening UN member states, civil society organizations, and UN entities to discuss that which is foremost for women and girls. My greatest thanks always to the Journalists and Writers Foundation, our partner for this event, and especially to Cemre Olker, representative to the UN Department of Global Communications, and Mehmet Kilic, president of the organization, who is with us here today as a panelist in the discussion, amongst several other brilliant people of whom we will be hearing from shortly. So before we get into the panel discussion, I just wanted to take a brief moment for a meditation exercise first. And then I will be introducing President Mehmet Kilic, who will honor us with some remarks. And then following this, we can go into the actual Q&A discussion with the panelists. So, and then we'll have some time at the end for some audience questions and some closing remarks. So on that note, thank you again, everyone, for being here. And let's start off by pausing through meditation together. I'll be introducing now Aruba Aisha. She is a trauma therapist with Partners for Trauma Recovery in Berkeley, California. And she has experience serving refugees, asylum seekers, and survivors of torture. So thank you so much, Aruba, for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me in this space. So we'll go ahead and begin. We'll be taking this moment to pause before beginning to ground us before we dive into questions that reflect very heavy realities. Some of us have read or researched, and others of us may have experienced. So this exercise is called box breathing. It is small, simple, and pretty easy. It may be familiar to some, and it has helped me in the past when I've started something new. So I'll explain it first, and then we can do it together as I count. And then I encourage us to try it by ourselves for a few moments. So I know I can't see everyone, but please close your eyes if you feel comfortable and you're in the space to do so. So as you close your eye, in your mind's eye, picture a square box with 4 sides. There are 4 steps to this exercise. The first step is to inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Make sure you close your lips and breathe in through your nose. Feel that breath come deep from your stomach, from your belly, or as close to it as possible. The second step will be to hold your breath for 4 seconds. The third, exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds. And because we're on mute, we can't see each other, please allow yourself to let out an audible sigh. And the last step is to once again hold your breath for 4 more seconds before we begin the box again. So I'll go ahead and count us off. And if you want, feel free to picture the box in your mind's eye as we begin. All right, so go ahead and breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And hold. 2, 3, 4. And as you continue to inhale and exhale, notice as you breathe in from your stomach and release how your body rises and falls with each breath. Notice where you're holding tension in your body. It might be in your jaw, it might be in your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your thighs, your legs, hands, feet. See if you can allow yourself to release some of that tension that you're holding. You can roll your shoulders or stretch a little in your seat. So you breathe in, hold, and exhale. Now I'll give us a few moments to do so on our own. Also, there is no wrong way of doing this. If you cannot hold your breath for 4 seconds, that is okay. We can do this for 2, we can do this for 3. The fact that you are here is enough, and I appreciate each and every one of you for joining. So as you begin or finish your last box breath, feel free to open your eyes, stretch a little as we return to this space. I want to thank each of you for joining me in this exercise. Please use this at any time in your day-to-day when you feel that you need to slow down, take a breath, feel the ground beneath your feet. And again, thank you to each panelist for joining in this, and thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you so much, Aruba, for leading that exercise. That always feels like I'm rediscovering again for the first time how to breathe. Back to basics. So what I want to do now is take the time to introduce one of our panelists for this morning, Mehmet Kilic. He is president of our partnering organization. And Mehmet is a dedicated educator, human rights advocate, and global leader with over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. Currently, Mr. Kilic serves as the president of the Journalists and Writers Foundation, a US-based international civil society organization dedicated to promoting the culture of peace, human rights, and sustainable development globally. With extensive experience in the UN human rights system, Mr. Kilic has engaged in interventions before UN treaty bodies and the special procedures of the Human Rights Council. His human rights advocacy includes providing pro bono legal assistance to refugees and marginalized individuals. Currently, Mr. Kilic is pursuing a PhD in education, specializing in global and comparative education. So everyone, please join me in welcoming President Kilic. Thank you.
Thank you, Farihah, for this kind and generous introduction. Hello and greetings to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Farihah and RoVena for this opportunity to join this important panel discussion on a critical issue worldwide, the refugee women's education crisis. Today, we have come together on this platform to highlight the barriers faced by women, refugees and girls globally, and to explore some multiple perspectives on this pressing challenge. On behalf of the Journalists and Writers Foundation, we are proud to collaborate with RoVena in organizing this panel discussion. I'm also honored to be amongst a distinguished panel of experts who have made significant contributions in supporting refugees, particularly women and girls across various regions. And I look forward to hearing your insights, learning from your invaluable experiences. Just to give you a brief background about our organization, the Journalists and Writers Foundation is an international civil society organization dedicated to the culture of peace, human rights, and sustainable development. Based in New York, we are proud to be associated with the United Nations Department of Global Communications in our shared mission to foster peaceful and inclusive societies. As a part of our human rights advocacy and legal assistance, the JWF emphasizes the UN Commission on the Status of Women as a crucial platform for mobilizing civil society organizations, women leaders, advocates to raise awareness about gender equality and women's empowerment. And we believe that together, all together, we can make meaningful and positive social change. This year, we are thrilled to collaborate with 16 NGOs, including RoVena from 7 different countries, to co-organize a series of events, including 14 panel discussions, 1 high-level reception, and a film screening focused on women's rights. At the heart of our efforts is, of course, the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, where we reflect on the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Today, we will talk about the challenges that women refugees encounter in accessing education, drawing on international perspectives. When we talk about the role of education, it is not only a pathway to women's empowerment, but it is a fundamental human right. As we talk about this important conversation, it is critical to understand that education of women, refugee women, is not a luxury, but it is a fundamental human right and a vital pathway toward empowerment, dignity, and a hopeful future. Unfortunately, many host countries view refugees as a burden, overlooking the immense contributions they can make to their new communities. At this moment, over 30 million refugee women and girls are risking their lives on unsafe and dangerous journeys, fleeing wars, persecution, and the catastrophic impacts of climate change. Unfortunately, many are denied their right to education, and this reality is a bitter truth for millions who face disheartening challenges. Now, let's take a moment to consider the international landscape. Let's think about from Middle East to Sub-Saharan Africa, from Eastern Europe to South Asia. Refugee women and girls encounter complex challenges that hinder their access to education. The disruption caused by wars and conflicts often result in destruction or misuse of educational facilities, making them unsafe for learning. For many refugee families traumatized by violence, survival takes priority over education, pushing schools to the outside of their daily life. Additionally, cultural norms, socioeconomic barriers complicate this crisis further. Discrimination against displaced women based on gender, ethnicity, or legal status significantly worsens this crisis. However, thinking about all these negativities, we are not hopeless. Around the globe, grassroots organizations, just like RoVena, humanitarian agencies such as UNHCR, and local communities are tirelessly working to dismantle the barriers preventing refugee women and girls from accessing education. I would like to share one notable example from the USA, which is Embrace Relief Foundation, which offers a range of educational and social services for women refugees and girls in Greece. Their programs, which include psychological support, language courses, career development, especially in the IT sector, empower women to integrate into society and contribute their valuable skills to the host countries. To effect real change, we must prioritize international collaboration and public-private partnerships, which aligns with SDG number 17. So governments, NGOs, and education institutions, we must work together to develop comprehensive, gender-sensitive policies tailored to unique needs of refugee women and girls. This involves advocating for essential funding, resources, and legal protections that facilitate educational access for refugee women and girls. So in conclusion, I would like to underline the fact that educating refugee women and girls is more than an act of charity. It is an investment in the future of our societies. An educated woman can disrupt the cycle of poverty, inspire future generations, and become an agent for social change. When we empower displaced women and girls, we not only uplift families and communities, but also contribute to the sustainability and prosperity of the nations. So I would like to stop here now and thank you, Farihah, for again inviting me to this important panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Mehmet, for your remarks. It really lays out the landscape of really the international realm and how much, as you mentioned, SDG 17, how much international collaboration is absolutely essential for securing this human right for women and girls. And a lot of the points that you mentioned, I'm delighted that we're gonna get to really dive into the nitty and gritty here with the Q&A with the panelists. So thank you so much, Mehmet, and we're gonna be hearing more from him soon. I also do want to stress that it's definitely true that although global efforts over the decades have led to progress in both girls' education and refugee education, education for specifically refugee girls is still lagging far behind, right? And Mehmet mentioned an example also from sub-Saharan Africa all the way to Europe. There was a study done by the Educational Development Trust, which showed that in Ethiopia in 2019, only 7% of refugee girls attended secondary school compared to 17% of refugee boys, right? And then compare that to 30% of non-refugee girls. So I think that that statistic kind of really highlights that this is a serious concern. But with us today, we have these talented specialists and panelists who are working on addressing different aspects of this issue. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open up our conversation with the panelists. And before my first question this morning, which I'm going to be directing to Hannah, Edber, and Siti Ayub, both of whom are women working in the classroom environment, I wanted to introduce them. So firstly, I'll start off with Hannah. Thank you, Hannah, for joining us. Hannah is the Director of Education and Programs at Global Village Project, a nonprofit school for refugee girls in Atlanta. She has taught and led for over 10 years in middle schools, high schools, and in college classrooms at UC Santa Cruz and at San Quentin State Prison. She has written and published on restorative justice, linguistic justice, and the impact of gentrification on public schools. Her work appears in several books and journals. So thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us today. And I'd like to also introduce our panelist, Siti. Siti Ayub is a graduate student at Marquette University, currently pursuing her studies in the Student Affairs in Higher Education program. In addition to her studies, Siti holds the position of Director of Education and Mental Health Services at the Rohingya Maya Communal Collaborative Network, a women-led, Rohingya-led, and refugee-led organization focused on Rohingya human rights issues, sexual and gender-based violence, education, and translocal solidarity, with an emphasis on women, peace, and security, and an intersectional framework. As a Rohingya living in Milwaukee, Siti aims to advocate for change and embody hope for her community. So thank you also, Siti, for being here. So my first question to you both, it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like Aruba's breathing exercise. It's sort of a back to basics question. When we talk about refugee education, what is it that we constitute education to mean or encompass? So what might be implementations or aspects that go beyond the core academic sense? And we can hear from Siti and then Hannah.
Yeah, sounds good. I can start first. Farihah, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me today. I am so honored to be here. And once again, my name is Siti Ayub. I am currently serving as the Director of Education and Mental Health Services at the Rohingya Maya Foran Collaborative Network. In short, we call ourselves RMCN. So you'll hear me saying RMCN over and over again throughout this. We are a woman lead, Rohingya lead, and also refugee lead organization currently working to help uplift the community and also Rohingya community at home who are being exiled in the Southeast Asia. I also mentioned this before, as a former child of refugee myself, I have experienced how it is to not have any access to education growing up. So I really appreciate being able to speak with all of you today regarding this topic. To answer the first question, I feel like there's the need to lay some ground information about who Rohingya are too. As a community, the Rohingya community have faced decades of systemic exclusion, particularly from the education system in our homeland, Burma, Myanmar. Since 1942, we have been subjected to genocide, and our access to basic necessity, human security, and education has been systematically denied. And the struggle to educate ourselves has been an immense challenge, not only due to the displacement and violence, but also because of the deliberate policy aimed at keeping us uninformed. In Rohingya refugee communities, education has become largely informal, as formal schooling remains out of reach. Women and girls face even greater barriers due to the lack of protection and the constant threat of military attack and gender-based violence. Because of that, families often keep them at home for safety instead of changing the system to accommodate their security needs. It became easier to, a more common response has been to exclude them entirely from education system. This cycle of exclusion is not limited to Myanmar. It continues in countries where Rohingya refugees seek safety, such as Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, and also Thailand. Even in these places, children often lack access to education, and many are even detained. Currently, I believe in Malaysia alone, about 1,500 Rohingya children are being held in detention, despite Malaysia being legally under the Child Rights Convention. The Burmese government also has deliberately targeted Rohingya individuals who are educated and capable of teaching, as they are feared the spread of knowledge. This is honestly one of the tactic of genocide, trying to silence those who have access to information, preventing the community from learning how to protect themselves and recognize the threat that is coming their way. The lack of access to correct information leave a lot of Rohingya communities and people into more vulnerable to violence and exploitation. In response, RMCN is working to shift this reality by gathering resources, both in monetary and also materials, just to support Rohingya children in refugee camps where education is not a priority. We are truly committed to ensure that at least some sort of informal schooling can take place within the camp we work with. For example, in Indonesia, we have launched small programs to teach women and children how to read and write. This informal school rely on older teenagers who have received some level of education to teach younger children. Additionally, we also have organized effort to bring in outside teachers, so Indonesian teachers from the community. But one barriers that we keep recognizing is the barriers of language, and that has been a significant challenge that Rohingya people in the camp are going through. And honestly, our initiative may be small and basic as of right now, but they serve a critical purpose. Beyond literacy, they provide Rohingya children and adults with essential skill to navigate daily challenges. This is to help them understand important document and make informed decision about their future. Education is honestly not just about learning to read and write. We're trying to ensure that every child and adult has the opportunity to learn and grow and reclaim the right to education. So that's a little bit of of what we're doing here at RMCN with the initiative that we have so far.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Edber. As Farihah mentioned, I'm the Director of Education and Programs at Global Village Project. We are the only school in the US educating only refugee girls. We're accredited as a middle school, so grades 6 through 8, but our students are between 11 and 18 years old because we accept them and place them based on their academic skills and academic English and math. And so one of the things that we really focus on, oh, I should mention our students come from all over the world. So we have most of our students right now are from Afghanistan because our student population is really determined by geopolitical factors and who's receiving refugee status and being resettled in our community specifically. So we have many Afghan students, but also students from Syria, Guatemala, Congo, Sudan, and the Central African Republic. And so one of the things that we really think about at GVP, as we call ourselves, is differentiating between formal education and the really powerful funds of knowledge that students come to us with, even if they've never been in school. The terms funds of knowledge or community cultural wealth are interventions by education scholars to help educators, I think, attend to the strengths and sources of understanding that students have, even if they have never been in a classroom before. And so some of those funds of knowledge might be an understanding of politics, or what we might call navigational capital, the ability to move between different institutions, to use different languages between in different contexts. Of course, our students have familial capital and social capital, or their families or communities are sources of strength. And also we think a lot about their aspirational capital, the way that their dreams are really major sources of strength, and also can really guide us as educators for how to help them move through the formal educational and American formal educational institutions we're posed to be able to support them with. And at our school, we really kind of shy away from saying we're empowering our students, because our students already come with really incredible sources of power. We like to take the onus off of the student, and whether or not she has power, because she does, and think about how we're removing barriers to her being able to access her education. And so a lot of what we do is think about how we can surround a student with support and, for example, drive our students to school, pick them up from where they live and drive them to the building and take them home, because we're removing the barrier of transportation. And because many of our students' parents are for good reason very protective and very concerned about their girls' safety, we do a lot to ensure that they're getting here safely. And when we go on field trips, we're very well staffed. We have a very excellent, in my opinion, student teacher ratio, and it's not just my opinion. It's many studies have proven that having more teachers and fewer students really enables teachers to really get to know their students, to understand those students, their academic needs, their emotional needs, and to be able to really cater to the unique needs of our girls. But I really do want to highlight some of the paradigms that can help us, I think, shift away from seeing refugee girls and women as not as strong and knowledgeable as they are, and really help us see ourselves as educators as being poised to draw and leverage those funds of knowledge for success in the institutions that we manage.
Thank you so much, Siti and Hannah. I think it's interesting. Siti mentioned sort of the idea of also being able to navigate these important documents, almost like those critical life skills that are specifically important for people, especially who are experiencing these surges of armed conflicts around the world, right? That sort of navigation is absolutely essential. And Hannah, I like how you use that term, navigational capital. I actually hadn't heard that one before. And I love the idea of aspirational capital, and we're going to get to some more about that later on. But thank you so much for sharing those paradigms. And Siti, thank you so much also for highlighting really like on the ground and in Indonesia and Malaysia what these challenges really look like. I wanted to ask you guys both a very brief follow-up question to sort of get a more detailed idea. I wanted to know like how you guys structure like an instructional period or even a full school day for the refugee girls and women that you guys are working with.
Yeah, so everything that we do centers around the relationships that we're building with our students, between teachers and students, and between students and each other. You know, for our students who have never been in a formal educational setting or have been, but were marginalized in that school or in that institution, it's really critical that we build a sense of belonging for our students. It's that sense of belonging when students really believe that school is for them and they are meant to be in school, that gives students kind of the conviction to move through challenges, to take academic risks, to ask questions, to present in front of the class, as well as to feel safe at school because they know that they are surrounded by people who care about them. So our school day, our relationships are really at the heart. So what that looks like in practice is we start and end every week with a whole school circle where we're all sitting in a circle and kind of going through a ritual process of breathing together, answering a check-in question with a talking piece, saying what we need to say for each other. And that continues also throughout their classes where we really have built in a way for students to connect with each other and their teachers pretty much throughout the day. We're also our classes, so we have a full school day schedule. So students are taking English language arts, math, science, social studies, music, soccer, women's health, and a social emotional learning class. Oh, as well as technology. But our students are getting this really full school day, but it's at an appropriate level for them. So we're starting when we have our newcomer classes, they're learning in their English language art classes how to spell and to decode syllables and sounds. They're learning what we might call in a typical American school at a pre-kindergarten level, even if they're 11 or 17, because that's the level that is appropriate for them. And then by the time they get to the third year of our program, they're reading much closer to their age group because they're getting that really individualized care and attention. So we're doing all that like a typical middle school might, but we're starting with what students know, and we're helping them to bridge into a place where they're going to be more successful once they leave our program. And most of our students do go into a public ninth grade high school. So we're trying to, what we call it mutually adaptive, which is not a term I made up, but one that I have stolen and use liberally, so that we're really, as a school, adapting to the needs of our students while also teaching our students how to adapt to the demands of an American school day.
I feel like compared to Hannah's, our like experiences on the opposite spectrum, just because the situation in the camp is nothing short of chaos. It depends on what the day and how it goes day per day. So there's not really a lot of formal education system available for Rohingya children. So the program that I mentioned prior with the camp that we work with, we have only been able to implement small scale informal education programs such as literacy classes. And this literacy classes is basic foundation. It's learning the ABCs. It's learning how to write your own name. It's also being taught by teenagers, Rohingya refugee teenagers. So it's not really, there's really no training being put in for the teenagers to teach. So to answer your question, there's not really a structure that we follow through. It's honestly hard to gauge like what a typical day would look like, just because the environment that this Rohingya refugee are living in is not really conducive to learning. So what we have been trying to do is at least have one day in a week where lesson is being taught. So once they learn the ABC, they just continue practicing until the next week. And this is also because of many of these children have witnessed genocide, violence, and displacement firsthand. So this psychological burden also make it harder for them to engage in education. So being mindful of everything, all the barriers, challenges, and also all the stressor, the initiative that we have put in place is there's no commitment to it. It's those who want to learn are able to access it. So that's from us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really interesting that, you know, it's true that you use the word chaos to describe the environment with the camps. So it's really the case maybe that even if there's no real structured everyday format that you're following from day to day, it could be that just that engagement with the peers, with the classroom, that itself could be a vehicle for normalcy, routine, goal-driven purpose, time with peers, positive engagement with people around you, right? Building a framework, a language of sorts, even just for the feelings that they're having or any ideas that they're having. So thank you so much for painting that picture for us, Hannah and Siti. I think I'd like to now actually open up our conversation further to two more of our panelists, both of whom are graciously joining us from Sweden. They're part of the same initiative. I would like to introduce Melody Blesserman and Pedrie Osman. They're currently pursuing a business degree at the Stockholm School of Economics. Alongside their studies, they sit on the board of First SSE, an initiative focused on breaking down barriers to educational opportunities and supporting underrepresented talent. Melody and Pedrie are also ambassadors and inspirational speakers for younger students, advocating for diversity and inclusion in higher education. Additionally, they were process leaders for a first summer program teaching self-leadership with the goal of empowering underrepresented students. So before I get into the question itself, which I want to hear from all of you guys, Pedrie, Melody, Siti, Hannah, very briefly, I wanted to bring up a UN Women in Dan Church Aid DCA needs assessment study that was done in 2020. And actually this did take place in the refugee camps of Cox's Bazar. So the study consulted women and girls in 5 different camps. And in the findings, one thing that was consistently shown was that a common barrier to these girls' schooling was oftentimes permission from their family members and community leaders. So as seen with this study, these classrooms for women and girls are often inseparable from the norms of their larger refugee community. So what have your experiences been with advocating for women and girls' enrollment when such precedent often does not exist, whether it be due to cultural or religious barriers or other reasons such as being a first-generation student?
Thank you so much, Farihah, for the introduction and for having us here today. It's truly great to be a part of this important conversation. And as you mentioned, Pedrie and I work with a foundation called First, and our core mission is to break down barriers to education. And we do this by inspiring young students and providing them with the right tools for success. And actually, what we observe often for the refugees that we meet is that the general expectation is often to pursue education because it is considered the key to being able to build up your life again from scratch. But on the other hand, also, we see that the, the culturally available or accepted educational opportunities are often limited to certain fields that are accepted within their culture. And it's often fields such as, medicine or engineering. And it's not always something that necessarily goes with their own career aspirations, more something that they feel they need to do. And also, this is, of course, because of the sense of responsibility that many refugees and second generation immigrants feel, wanting to honor the sacrifices that their parents made for them. And with that, of course, comes a deep sense of duty. So I think that's why it's so important to create spaces where these women feel it's not about choosing between honoring their family sacrifices or pursuing their dreams, but helping them see that they can actually do both at the same time.
Yes, and also thank you for the introduction. Melody gave a good answer to the question, but I can say that I agree. And as we mentioned earlier, there are systemic barriers that can prevent women and girls from exploring those non-traditional fields. And there are cultural norms, for example, like belief that certain professions are not appropriate for women, or the pressure from family and the people in your surrounding. But also something very important I would like to highlight is that many lack this representation. They don't have the examples of women succeeding in those unconventional fields. And therefore, these barriers can easily lead many women to pursue studies that may not be fulfilling for them, unfortunately. And that's also why we at first place a strong emphasis on inspiring and showing that success is possible, even in career paths that are less conventional in their culture or in their religion and their background. Yeah.
I honestly would like to piggyback Pedrie's and Melody's point, and speak more from my experience growing up. Because I was born in Malaysia, came to America back in 2013 when I was 13, and life was different, y'all. Honestly, in Malaysia, it was a struggle. Couldn't go to school, couldn't. If I were to still be in Malaysia, I think right now at the age of 25, I would be married with 3 children. And that's the reality of majority of the refugees in all this Southeast Asia. But being given the opportunity to reinstate in a third world country, in America, I was given the opportunity to dream bigger, right? And even now, one of the struggle of girls in the Rohingya community is the lack of confidence that they're able to achieve much more than just being married and taking care of the family, right? Hey, there's nothing wrong with being married and being a mom and taking care of the family, but when you grow up not having that role model of being able to achieve much more, it's harder. That's not the reality that they live through. So honestly, education has always been the guiding light in my life. None of my parents have been to school before, so I really wanted to be the first one to become a foundation for the Rohingya community in Milwaukee and also for my siblings. As the oldest child out of 5 siblings, I want to be a strong foundation for them to be able to look up on and also use as a role model. So yeah, non-conventional. You don't usually see Rohingya women achieving higher education, but that's not impossible. There's a need of role model and mentorship in the community to push that narrative out.
Yeah, at Global Village Project, we're kind of uniquely positioned because, I never have to convince our families or the community that this is a good place for their daughters. In part because, we're in the US and we have compulsory education up to 16. And so, many families who see the choice between the local public school and what we can offer, it's apparent. But, when I'm interviewing families and prospective students, when we're doing our enrollment for new students, um, our families are really adamant that this is what they want for their daughters. Um, I've had many fathers say to me in these meetings, I never had an education, and this is what I want and need for my girls. And that's really, really beautiful. And that's one of the things that is really special about our program is that we have these relationships with the families, and are able to really build trust with families. And, of course, that spreads because people are neighbors and cousins and friends when they're resettled in the same area. But we work very hard to build that trust so that families know it is a risk to send your daughters to school because we have students who are beyond the age of being legally required to be enrolled somewhere. Um, but building that trust that, this may be very new or different, or the family may never have had any formal education, but feels that we will take care of their girl and help steward them through this system is something that yeah, is really special for us. And I will say, just to echo some of the points that Siti and others made, yeah, many of our students have very high aspirations to become a cardiologist or to become an engineer, and those are kind of the two pathways that they see available to them. And I fully agree that being able to, well, one, I think, deliver an education that is valuable for its own sake, and two, um, to be able to help students envision what careers might be available to them and might make sense for them, based on their skills and their passions and their experiences, and also the education that they'll be, able to attain. And I think it's really a balance. We want our students to be able to, um, yeah, aim for their dreams, of course. And, their dreams are co-constructed with their families and communities. Most of our students are not coming from individualistic cultures, but also um, to to be alongside students as they're figuring out what that means for them as new Americans, essentially.
Thank you so much to all of you guys for your variety in responses. Yeah, I think the community trust building, the community sensitization, that's definitely something that takes time and a lot of effort to, really grow over time. And a lot of you mentioned representation and role models. So that's actually a great segue into what I wanted to talk about next. And I wanted to introduce another panelist to the conversation, Mari, last but not least. And Mari is a Sudanese American model, entrepreneur, and community organizer. Born in Khartoum, Sudan, she fled the civil war with her family at the age of 9, seeking political asylum in the United States. Her journey from refugee to becoming an international model and activist, a mother, an entrepreneur, and community organizer, and now working in corporate America is a testament to resilience, determination, and an unwavering commitment to creating opportunities for herself while always looking back to where she comes from and lending a hand to others. So my question that I'll direct to Mari, Pedrie, and Melody is that there's often a shortage of female role models, whether that be female teachers from the refugee communities or maybe even mothers who have received an education. What effect does female to female mentorship have upon young girls?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Farihah, for inviting me to participate in such an important conversation that we quite frankly should be having on a daily basis with leaders, advocates such as everyone on this panel. And so I'm very excited and honored to be here to hear some of your perspectives regarding the education of refugee women and girls. First, I would really like to touch briefly on the last point of your last question, in that there are in fact limitations and rather challenges that many refugee women face when seeking education, be it culture, religion, and or being first generation. I believe that the mere fact that most refugee women or girls are first gen in the education setting it's not often that there is a lack of other female role models. It's that there are no female role models who have been in their shoes and navigated through the challenges of one being a refugee, right? Often that comes with its own levels of trauma that need to be addressed before one can think about, thriving in the education setting. And then two, being first generation, you often feel like a deer in the headlights, right? Everything is new to you. The perspectives, their perspectives, the perspective of the refugees is often different from those who are in the classroom setting, teaching these women, or in the case of a refugee woman in the diaspora, their perspective is often different from their peers, right? So because of these challenges, I think that, female to female, especially mentors who have had similar experiences to those that they are mentoring is extremely important. And I could not overemphasize the extremely important part. It's beyond powerful for shaping the aspirations and the confidence of some of these young girls, or even women who are raising their own families, right? When a girl sees a woman who from their own background, right, whether it be a teacher, a professional, an educated mother, breaking barriers, having been in their situation, it signals that their dreams are in fact possible, regardless of their limitations of their environment. And so, the guidance, the encouragement, the sense of belonging that I think mentorship provides to young girls is vital for her, especially in the refugee communities, because, where traditional, gender roles can often limit their aspirations. And so a female mentor serves as, a living proof that education, independence, and even leadership are all attainable for some of these young refugee girls. And that girl was once me. And all of these things that, I aspired 20 years ago, I sort of have now. And so that importance of, myself looking back and mentoring and ensuring that I am visible to another refugee girl is extremely important.
Thank you so much, Marie. I absolutely agree with you. And I would like to tell you more about my own experience of female to female mentorship. And just like you said, it's very important, and it has been incredibly powerful for me personally, because I haven't had female role models around. That could be one reason. And for example, at first, we have a mentorship program called First Connect. And I've had the opportunity to be part of it for 2 years in a row, where I was matched with 2 female mentors from 2 different industries. And just seeing these successful women who come from similar backgrounds as me has been a huge source of inspiration. And I have realized that it's not just about that success is possible. It has been more than that, more about feeling proud and motivated by it. And it has truly motivated me to do the same for someone else, to open the door for the person coming after me. And just this cycle of support where each woman lifts the next, that's something I find really important, and I love that. And honestly, also I feel like the dynamic itself in a female to female mentorship just feels different, but in a very positive way. I personally feel that there's often more understanding, more openness. I feel like there's a greater courage to show vulnerability, but also I feel like women used to encourage each other at a deeper level. And I've also experienced that it goes beyond career advice. At the end, for me, it was all about confidence, about resilience, and knowing that you belong in spaces where women, unfortunately, usually are underrepresented. And most importantly, getting that feeling of, I can also take that step, just like her, just like she did. And this mindset just encourages us young women to push ourselves forward, to take bigger steps, and to dream big and to fulfill our dreams.
Oh, Pedrie, thank you for sharing that. And I think you both bring up great points. And to build on that, as you both mentioned, I really do believe that relatability is key. And from my experience at first, when young girls can see someone who looks like them, shares similar experiences, or comes from a community similar to their own, it gives them a sense of possibility. And it tells them, like Pedrie said, if she can do it, so can I. And that feeling of connection is just incredibly powerful because it breaks down the barrier of what is often seen as impossible or unattainable. And I think that really is also a core part of our initiative to provide role models who reflect the experiences and the identities of the young students that we work with. And I also think that that is especially important because, as you mentioned, Farihah, in your question, for many underrepresented communities, role models from their own community, they're just not available, especially in regards to education. And they might not have access to the guidance and the support that they need at home, especially if their families are navigating challenges of their own. That, of course, comes with being a refugee. For example, language barriers that, are very common. So from my experience in those situations, relatable mentors, they become crucial.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. The relatability, I think, is definitely an important thing to stress because it really is true that the sort of like the border of your imagination, it really is set by what you've seen, what you've observed, right? What you've interacted with, even if it is your imagination. So thank you so much for saying that. And I want to, while staying with this idea of community, I want to scale out a little and take a little bit of a detour to think about how a lot of these refugee communities are in a host country, in a host ecosystem, right? So refugee students face a lot of times numerous barriers while pursuing higher education in their host countries, right? And refugee integration into those national systems is often imposed by these host governments. So I kind of want to hear now from Mehmet and Siti. In your opinion, what are the best practices for civil society actors to advocate for educational reform in these cases, or how to best navigate these barriers?
Well, I think we need to change the narrative about refugees first, because when we think about the refugee integration into the national education system, there are significant advantages to the host countries, because in the long term, when refugees, they improve their education, it will not only benefit the refugees themselves, but it will enable them to contribute meaningfully to their new communities, to new host countries. I would like to touch upon the 1950 Refugee Convention, specifically Article 22nd, which underscores this right by ensuring that refugees receive the same treatment as nationals regarding elementary education and equitable treatment regarding other education levels considering high school or higher education. And this includes states must provide refugees the same access to elementary education as is afforded to nationals. And another thing is that states, they should offer refugees the most favorable treatment possible at higher education levels, including the recognition of foreign school certificates, diplomas, and degrees, as well as waiver of fees and the provisions of scholarships. And I have come across many students, they come to different countries, because they're running for their life, right? So they don't get their diplomas, transcripts, so everything is left behind. Or even though when they come, their diplomas are not accepted. So that's one of the challenges, and states, they really have to make incentives to recognize these foreign certificates and diplomas for higher education. And unfortunately, many governments are hesitant to uphold this right, and often they are reluctant to implement the necessary services to alleviate language barriers or to fully grant these educational rights to refugees. In terms of the Journalists and Writers Foundation, we do not engage directly with individuals on the ground, but however, our advocacy for refugee rights has highlighted this issue repeatedly, particularly when host countries deny refugee rights to education or impose requirements for specific documentation. And based on our past experiences, we have taken several approaches to address these challenges. I would like to share just a couple of examples. For example, we have collaborated closely with local stakeholders and organizations, including UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNESCO, and the College Board. In the JWF, we have advocated for governments to facilitate the integration of refugees into their national education system. And we also worked with international bodies and human rights organizations to put some diplomatic pressure on the host countries to uphold refugees' right to education. Just like maybe one last remark is that I think one of the major barriers faced by refugees is the lack of documentation. Okay, if they don't have passports, refugee cards, residence permits, or national IDs, which can result in statelessness. Okay, if you are stateless, then that creates a lot of problems. Just one example, for example, in a country, I don't want to name the country, but in a country in North Africa, some of the high school girls were unable to take SAT exams necessary for higher education, right? Because they lacked valid passports or government issued IDs. And in this instance, we coordinated with the UNHCR and the college board to make exceptions for these high school students to allow them to take the test using their refugee cards or resident cards. And another case, while high school students may receive acceptance from different universities abroad, right? If you don't have, again, valid passports, it prevents them traveling abroad, which really hinders their right to higher education. So these examples, I think, illustrate the complex barriers and challenges that refugees encounter.
I think that reform must take place at both the government and also local administrative levels, just to address the challenges faced by refugee children in exile across Southeast Asia. Something that our network is actively doing is working on to push for these changes, recognizing that each country require a different approach based on its specific policies and attitude toward refugee. For example, in Thailand, access to education is relatively less challenging just because there are fewer Rohingya refugee in the country. And there's also this level of understanding that allow some inclusion of Rohingya children in the education system. However, that is not the reality in other Southeast Asia, like Malaysia and Indonesia, where formal education remain out of reach. And majority of the time, families often are forced to seek alternatives such as like private schools, which I also did when I was in Malaysia, which is simply really expensive and mostly majority of the family couldn't afford. One thing that our organization is doing, and one of our goals is to advocate for systemic change. This is just to ensure that Rohingya children are formally included in the school system, and they have legal access to employment, and they can receive basic healthcare, just because those are not things that are being accessible to Rohingya refugees currently. These are fundamental rights and not privilege. We believe that ASEAN nation must take a stand in addressing this issue, especially given their role in enabling the crisis. It's not just about advocating for inclusion, it's also about keeping them accountable for this crisis.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for highlighting those aspects. I think it's Mehmet's first point is something I definitely want to stress. The rhetoric, I believe, really needs to change about in regards to the host refugee dynamics, because you're absolutely right. It promotes, when the refugees are educated, it promotes social cohesion and tolerance of people from different backgrounds in these environments, right? But it's also true that policy responses may need to vary within host countries based on local conditions and those refugee host dynamics, right? Because a lot of cases, if we're in a situation where they speak two different languages, then there have been instances where there's, feelings of a little bit, increased hostility, or a feeling like there might be a misunderstanding gap there. So along the same vein, as I believe CP, you also mentioned, refugees are often denied the right to work because of these host governments. It's a hardship for them to give fees, right? For books, supplies, they cannot physically make up that cost in labor or even in time, even if they had the opportunity to do so. So this question is from Mari. I wanted to know, when the barrier of cost in this way is sort of insurmountable in climates where communities are dependent on aid, what are ways in which the rest of us can get involved through other types of support or skills training?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think that answer has already kind of been mentioned, right? Mentorship has sort of consistently come up. But really the reality is that, right, the cost is often the biggest barrier to education in these refugee settings, especially where families and or communities are relying on aid organizations for survival. So, but however, there are meaningful ways, I think, for us to on an individual basis, for us to get involved beyond just direct financial contribution. And obviously financial contribution is always welcome, but I think there's, as a supplement to that, mentorship and things like that. But again, financial support with long-term impact, right? Instead of just donating to aid organizations, people can support, scholarship funds, tangibly get involved with mentorship programs that was mentioned by the first organization here, right, in Sweden. I think also, I haven't seen a lot of these type of models out there, and hopefully there's more of them to come, where refugees are matched with, with a mentor. It could be in a foreign country or within their country, directly within their country, right? I think, obviously skills training and knowledge sharing is a huge piece of that. Not all support has to be monetary. So many refugee communities lack, as again, everyone has mentioned here, lack access to the mentorship. And so whether it be, digital literacy, language proficiency, right? I had mentors earlier on in my journey here in America. My fifth grade teacher, whom I still keep in touch with, she was a huge part of my time learning the English language here. And as I've continued to sort of grow up and evolve into the woman that I am today, I've sought out entrepreneurship sponsors and mentors, and seeking out people that have leadership roles, and seeking out their support and advice on how I can attain some of the positions that they have here, right? And so the need is always there. And I think for some of us who have sort of, accomplished some of these goals, it's not always, we just have to always keep in mind that it's not always easy for someone who is maybe a couple of steps behind you to ask for your help. And so offering yourself is so important, and remembering that, you know, that the need is there, and to make yourself available for some of the people who might need a little bit of encouragement or guidance and support. And so I do encourage people really to get, I could not emphasize it more, to get more involved on a mentorship level, to seek out community-led initiatives that provide education for girls or boys, especially girls, obviously, but and then, you know, sustained contributions to grassroots organizations could make a tremendous difference. Using your platforms, social media is huge now, right? Advocacy and awareness, raising awareness around some of these issues, and advocating for policies that that support education for refugee girls and women is obviously crucial to getting more folks aware of some of these you know, nuanced challenges that refugee women and girls experience, right? Someone mentioned earlier supporting women-led and refugee-led initiatives, because oftentimes the most effective programs, I think, are run by the refugees themselves, right? Because they understand not only the individual needs, but the broader community needs. So by supporting, you know, schools and businesses and training programs that are run by some of these refugee groups, or former refugees that are now sort of looking back and trying to lend a hand to others. And so I think there are many more solutions out there, but these are just a few that we can sort of start with. And as you start with one, you'll discover more, right? But I think the key is really just to start and to make yourself available.
Thank you so much. And yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned about a lot of times when you're several steps ahead, it's not that your heart isn't in the right place, but you just may not know, you know, exactly where someone needs support. And on the other side, someone who needs that support, they may not know how to approach a mentor. So I think what you said about engaging specifically with these community initiatives, that mechanism is sort of already in place for you. So it just makes it easier. I want to sort of, we've been talking a bit about financial and socioeconomic barriers. I kind of want to switch gears and maybe think a little bit about physical barriers for refugee women and girls with the education crisis, specifically menstruation and access to toilets, as well as feminine sanitation, are often huge barriers to girls that continuing to attend school. And then in consideration of other physical barriers, there's also safety and traveling to school, safety within the classroom. I wanted to ask Siti, how are these aspects mitigated and addressed?
Honestly, being in camp, it's really hard to address menstruation, access to toilet, and overall sanitation for Rohingya girls in this refugee camp. And unfortunately, there are few effective solutions in place. I mean, just to illustrate how severe the issue is, in these camps, due to the funding and also aid being cut, sanitation has been worsened drastically. At least in Bangladesh and Indonesia, Rohingya women and girls often have to share a single bathroom with up to, I believe, 10 families. And this forced them to navigate a complete lack of privacy and always in constant fear for their safety. And these bathrooms are not located near their homes, meaning they must walk either several blocks or walk in the dark just to access them, often in unsafe condition. And the structure themselves are makeshift, built from plastic tarps and bamboo stake, providing little to no security. And the fear of being seen while using the bathroom or showering is a daily reality, which lead to significant psychological distress. And I strongly believe that these challenges directly impact a girl's ability to even learn going through the psychological distress really affect the mental and also physical well-being. And when basic sanitation and safety needs are not being met, education becomes a secondary concern. And the anxiety, discomfort, and lack of security surrounding menstruation and hygiene create another barrier to learning. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of ground to still cover on that aspect. I think, it's something that, like you were saying, the lack of privacy, it's something that definitely has psychological impacts, especially on, a population that is already very vulnerable to these sort of psychosocial stressors. So that's, I think, something that maybe that needs to be talked about more, something that maybe specifically funded initiatives, maybe there's an opportunity, a space for that there. So thank you so much for highlighting specifically what's happening there in the camps. I want to maybe actually return again to the idea of, so we talked about some physical barriers, safety, whether that be physical safety, psychosocial safety. Let's think a little bit about sort of the dilemma of educational equity in the face of stereotypes about profitability. From UNHCR, if a refugee family has limited resources and has to choose which siblings can continue with their education, boys are often prioritized because they're seen as having greater future earning potential, right? And so then it leads some communities to believe there's no need to educate girls, right? And it becomes almost like a self-perpetuating feedback loop. So this misconception of higher profitability of male education has impacted several communities. And it also ties into the invisible labor which women and girls do, which many families are reluctant to pull them away from. So I wanted to hear again from Mehmet on how might we combat this view that educating women is not advantageous when actually there are statistics and research obviously showing otherwise.
Thank you, Farihah. Gender inequality is a huge problem in our global world, right? And then the CSW is a platform to raise women voices to ensure that gender equality, equity, considering women education and employment after graduation. And unfortunately, we are behind to achieve gender equality. And I think that we have all encountered various beliefs suggesting that educating women, particularly refugee women, is not beneficial and that such education is a waste of resources. Unfortunately, some people, they believe in that. And these perspectives are often justified by religious, cultural, socioeconomic, or sometimes historical factors. And the consequences of these beliefs are devastating. And I would like to just share some statistics with you. According to the International Labour Organization, women's global labor force participation is at 47% compared to 72% for men. So the disparity is, like 25% point gap between men and women in terms of the women's global labor force participation, comparing men and women. And in some regions, the disparity in women's participation in the workforce exceeds 50%. Think about it. And let's think about, women make the half of the world population. Considering that, I think these are really devastating numbers. And to address these complex challenges, urgent and concrete actions are necessary to promote equal participation of women and men in the labor force. And based on our experience, we have actively challenged these misconceptions in 3 different ways. The first way, we have reported and advocated against these beliefs that educating women is not advantageous, especially those rooted in social, cultural, and religious norms. I think reporting and advocating is important. The second one is we have highlighted the economic, health, societal, and other benefits that resulting from educating women, and we have such examples, role models in our panel. Wonderful women who were refugees or children of refugees, and they have become advocates of refugees. And the third one is we have engaged in male allies. I think that's important, right? We need a he for she. We need male allies who have championed the cause of women's education. So this is not something that should be only left for women. It should be men and women working together.
Yes, thank you. That's a really great point. It's not only women's rights, it's not only for women to consider it. Obviously, we need our male counterparts to meet us there in that space. So that's a very good point that you mentioned. And thank you so much for the work that you've been doing in regards to sort of attempting to at least improve the visibility around that gender inequality. Along with education, I want to talk about entrepreneurial capacity. Entrepreneurship can also facilitate social mobility and effective integration by providing refugees with skills and opportunities in their new environment. So there really is a relationship also between education and that entrepreneurial drive. What outcomes have you seen in the entrepreneurial space when women are supported this way? And I would love to hear from Mari, Melody, and Pedrie.
Okay, I'll go first. Listen, I think we could all agree here that the relationship between education and entrepreneurial drive, or rather the drive to just make change, right, is undeniable. I want to take the unfortunate misconception that was just mentioned that the boys are just a better investment, and flip it just right on its head, right, by saying that when women are given access to education paired with mentorship and the resources that they need, they don't just uplift themselves. I think they transform entire economies, right? I mean, this is a known and proven fact, I think. And I think we've sort of just been marketed the opposite, right? There's a well-known, my favorite African proverb that states, if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a nation, right? And this proverb, I think, highlights the transformative impact of women's education and the importance of empowering women to reach their full potential, right? And it's not really empowering. I love what Hannah said earlier. It's not really empowering. It's nurturing someone to find that power within themselves. You're not really bringing something outside and putting it in them. You're helping her access her own power. And so when you help a woman reach her full potential, I think the ripple effects of that, the ripple effects that can come, that could potentially come with that to impact societies are really astronomical. And so I couldn't emphasize that more. When we support a woman with education and the skills, again, in the resources, it's I could just go on, and I'll let the other folks talk here. I know we've been sort of going for a while, but I just wanted to leave it with that.
Thank you so much, Mari. I did want to make another announcement that if anyone watching in the audience would like to join in, let us know in the chat and we can actually add you in and you can have the floor if there's something that you'd want to speak on. So feel free to do that. Just let us know in the chat. Okay, so moving right along, if we think about sort of the avenues for educational and entrepreneurship programming, one of those is obviously technology. So digital and broadcast platforms, technology, they expand education beyond the classrooms, right? So this increases modes for programming, but it also can exacerbate already existing inequalities, particularly for women and girls. So there is that technology gap when such methods are used in refugee communities. How might we, and this is for Mehmet, how might we encourage more tech equity and usage for women and girls?
Yeah, I think that's an important, part of this conversation, which is addressing the technology gap among women and girls in refugee communities, which is crucial for empowering them and also enhancing their educational and economic opportunities. I would like to share a couple of strategies to encounter tech equity and usage for women and girls in this context. I think one of the strategies could be to donate digital devices to refugee women and girls. So NGOs and governments can collaborate with the companies to provide affordable and donate these devices. Another one is, access to internet. Many communities do not have Wi-Fi or internet access. And, especially during the COVID time, many students, they have to have, Wi-Fi internet to connect to the classrooms. Another one is digital literacy programs. And I think, like one of the panelists talked about it, that which is very important to implement, comprehensive training programs focused on digital literacy. Mentorship programs, again, pairing women with tech mentors that can foster interest and confidence in using tech. And, female-focused initiatives. I think, women-led tech initiatives, within the communities that could allow, women, to excel. And we can talk about culturally relevant content, because when refugees, they come to a new host country, they bring their culture, right? They bring their culture, religion, and, many things. So that's why the content has to be culturally relevant and available in local languages, so that the integration is faster. And, maybe role models, our panelists, they talked about it. I think like success stories that will really inspire and motivate girls to pursue a similar path. Collaboration for training, skill building programs, and advocate for gender equality policies. I think that's what we do as the JWF, which is very important to really, pressure, or sometimes, encourage governments or policymakers to advocate for gender inclusive policies. And I can go more and more, but by implementing these strategies, we can create an environment that really encourages and supports greater technology equity for women and girls in refugee communities, and they can really harness the transformative power of technology for their education, livelihood, and empowerment. That's what I could say.
Thank you, Mehmet. So yeah, it might be true that tech might expose some pre-existing or complicating fault lines between, the two genders and any possible inequity, but these seem like they are at least addressable with concerted and intentional efforts. I want to turn a little broadly now towards identity again, and how various aspects of one's identity not only could complicate, but also work in synergy together in one's experiencing of the world. So a study by Liebeg and Tronstad in 2018 pointed out that the refugee women face a potential triple disadvantage, combining challenges related to gender, immigrant status, and forced migration, which might compound or reinforce each other. But counter to this, how might the educated refugee woman actually be triply enriching of themselves and their communities, including their male peers? So we've already kind of touched on some aspects of this, but if there are any other thoughts that you'd like to follow up briefly, and I'll direct this towards Mari and Mehmet.
I think I agree with the conclusion that refugee women are subject to triple disadvantage or discrimination because of their gender or immigrant status or forced migration. However, I believe that when refugee women gain access to education and empowerment, they can become agents for meaningful and positive change within their communities. And, they can create jobs for income generation, right? If they have, good education, and they can have financial independence by gaining skills and qualifications. And then this can really reduce reliance on aid as well. We can have role models for change. That's important to inspire young generations. And we can advocate for gender equality, which we all do during the Commission on Status of Women. And I think, lastly, I would like to share, knowledge sharing and leadership. We really need women leaders to come, to the stage, share their experiences, inspire young, girls to really fulfill their potentials.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add to that. And I like to use my mom always an example, because I often tell people, if my mom was, she obviously came here at an older age after having had 7 children, with just a few of us. We all sort of came at different times. But I often tell people, if my mom was educated in the States, she would probably be in Washington right now, right? She's a woman who I believe who if she were provided the necessary means to be educated and to drive impact, she has the perseverance, the grit, the strength to flip all of this, narrative and turn these very challenges that refugee women face into triple enrichment for herself, for her community, and even for her male counterparts, right? I think an educated refugee woman is not just she's not just a survivor; she's a driver of change, whether it be economic, personal. She can raise her family in a way that someone who hasn't gone through the same experiences as her will never be able to reach that level of strength. And so it's not about comparing or anything, but I think that, this group of women have something that is untapped. And just given the attention and the nurturing required, I mean, she's invincible. And I've witnessed it firsthand, front row with my mom. And so, yeah, I couldn't, I'll just keep going on and then I'll start crying. So, yeah, these triple disadvantages can be turned on this very woman that we've been discussing and talking about. She's the one capable of turning it right on top of its head and turning it into a triple enrichment opportunity for herself and her community.
Yeah, thank you so much. I like that, not a survivor, but a driver. I don't know if you just came up with that on the spot, but that was good.
I was just talking about my mom,
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and oftentimes it's not like you really need to look out, far within your community to find those role models. Like it's oftentimes the people in our households. So thank you so much. So education is enriching, no doubt, and it's also protective, right? Education is a right, which in fact is also protective of other rights. It reduces girls' vulnerability to exploitation, gender-based violence, teenage pregnancy, and child marriage. I wanted to ask Siti and Hannah now, what might be the effectiveness of the integration of female education with gender-based violence initiatives or other social initiatives?
I feel like for Rohingya community, any form of education, whether it's home-based, center-based, private, or even formal schooling is crucial, because at this point, the method of delivery matter less than the simple fact that learning is made accessible in some capacity. Education in any form is a vital tool for empowerment and also a step toward the liberation of the Rohingya people. And integration, female education with gender-based violence initiative or the social program could be highly effective in addressing multiple barriers at once. Education is not just about literacy, in my opinion. It's also about equipping women and girls with the knowledge and skill to navigate challenges that they are currently facing. This include things that we have been talking about: safety, rights, and protection, and a blended approach that combine home-based learning with the community-centered teaching could help overcome a lot of obstacles that we have talked about. By ensuring that education is accessible in different ways, we create more opportunity for refugee women and girls in general to learn despite the difficulty they are currently facing, whether it's through formal schooling, informal schooling. Access to education is essential just to, in general, break any cycle of oppression and building a stronger and more resilient refugees.
Yeah, and I think, at our school in the American context, we spend a lot of time talking with our students about their rights and the ways that, for example, the police and the authorities can protect them, but also what caution they should and can use when interacting with authorities in any way. And so we also explain to our students some of the differences, both cultural and legal, in the American context versus where their home countries may be in terms of what women's rights are and what domestic violence law dictates. And we try and do that with our students, but also with our family outreach, and so that our families understand what to expect and what the cultural and legal norms are here. And in particular, in the American legal context right now, guiding our families with how they might need to interact with authorities for themselves and their families and neighbors who might have a different legal status than they do. So, a lot of it is, creating that trust and safety so that we're not, obviously positioned to give legal advice, but we are positioned to give a legal education for what it means to be here in the US and to navigate our particular systems, both, to protect themselves and also to seek protection.
Thank you. And that's a very great point you put up, especially with the current climate, sort of being informed about, their rights and taking cautions with authorities and such. Just moving right along, just in the interest of time, I wanted to quickly get a perspective of how might we continue to follow up with students, right? Their progress, potential obstacles to best ensure continuity of their educational care. And let's hear briefly from Pedrie and Melody.
Yes, and this is such an important question, and thank you for asking it. So to really support students and make sure they stay on track, for us at least, it's very important to be there for them at every step. And for example, at first, we operate at different levels. We start early on, before high school, and then we start inspiring them to go to university, to motivate them for higher education. And during high school, we motivate them by guiding them to choose their university path. And what is important here is to this is when we try to rewrite their previous thinking, as we spoke about before, and show them all the educational opportunities that exist for them. And this is usually when students don't feel like they're too free to make decisions regarding their career path on their own. And then at last at university, we offer the networks and connections to this corporate world. So those are some specific initiatives, but in general and throughout this entire system and throughout every step, we follow up by, for example, offering guidance, encouraging them, and providing real opportunities to help them move forward. And we try to make sure to show them that we are there for them, to support them at every step. And for many, especially those from non-academic backgrounds, the biggest challenge is usually, it's not only about academics, but not having someone to show them the way. And I was one of them. We have, for example, many young talents in the community who lack that support. They lack someone who can point them on the right direction. They lack someone who can recommend them the best schools. They lack someone who can provide advice, someone who can just simply share their own story, their own journey. How did they get to where they are today? And without that support system, it's for sure easy to feel lost or unsure about what comes next. And that's usually when many young talents start questioning themselves. I was again one of them, and just like questioning, am I even capable of doing this? And that's also when, I used to say, chance rather than choice ends up shaping their future path. And again, that's why we emphasize mentorship and all these leadership opportunities and the importance of strong community in these types of questions and ensuring continuous education.
Yes, I think you summarized it in a great way, Pedrie. And to build on that, I think a big part of what you're saying is also creating this cycle, which we talked about before, where students don't just receive support, but they also give back when they're further along in their journey. And this is something that we see so often in our community at first, where students who once benefited from guidance later become mentors themselves. And they do this because they want to pay it forward and they want to open doors that were once open for them. And to really make this cycle work and also keep it going, the way you get people to give back isn't about asking, it's by inspiring them. And when students experience that meaningful support, and when they see firsthand how it changes their confidence and their opportunities, they naturally want to pass that forward. And if we intentionally build that into each step, as Pedrie mentioned, it becomes almost like a self-steering wheel. And the more we embed mentorship and encouragement and this shared experience into the journey, the more the cycle just sustains itself. And that's why this isn't just about guiding students, it's about equipping them with the confidence to take bigger steps, to push past self-doubt, and believe that they belong in spaces they might not have even imagined for themselves. So at the end of the day, it's about making sure that no student feels like they're doing this alone. It's about showing up, it's about offering the right support and creating opportunities in each step so we can help them see what's possible and just as importantly, inspire them to continue the cycle for, the next generation.
Thank you so much, Pedrie and Melody, for those points. Before I get into the last question, I just wanted to go through some audience comments and questions. From RoHefsu, was asking, is RoVena just focusing on the higher education of refugee women and girls? So the answer to that is no. We're right now focused on Rohingya higher education for both men and women, but I wanted to on the opportunity of the CSW, sort of highlight the specific challenges that are specific to women and girls. Okay, we also have a question for Siti from Kathleen Novelia. She says, amazing work that you do for the asylum seekers in Indonesia. Are they allowed to work?
The policy that is being stated right now, they are not allowed to work as refugee. This is also why majority of the Rohingya refugee in the camps are struggling, because once again, due to the cut in fund and also AIDS, it's really difficult for them to continue living and survive within this camp. And this is why majority of the time you hear news of them fleeing to another country to get better opportunity, which is dangerous in some sense too. I also see additional question. I'll just continue answering it. Vocational skills such as woodworking and sewing. We are actually starting to put together a sewing classes for women and girls. We are in the process of like putting together materials to send to Indonesia and also Bangladesh, just so we can start sewing skill programs for women and children. But aside from that, we are still in the progress of bringing more initiative and ideas at hand. As for the language that is being taught for reading and writing, it's 2 different languages in Indonesia. One is Indonesian and English as the main language that we teach all these refugees. I hope that answered the questions.
Thank you, Siti. If anyone else has any audience questions, please write them into the chat. So the last thing I wanted for us to consider was an approach to education that's less outcome-based and more focused on qualitative goals and dreams and aspirations. How do we establish these lines of communication without resurfacing individual or communal trauma and being sensitive of this history? I don't know if maybe Aruba is a trauma therapist, if she wants to jump in on this too.
Yeah, I would just start by saying that, one of our practices is really to let students lead the conversation and lead what they would like to, what they want to share. We would never ask students directly to tell us about their experience prior to or in the US or any part of their resettlement journey that they are not opting in to share. So, for example, English language arts teacher might have an assignment where students are asked to select select an object in their life and tell a story about it. And that invites students to decide what level of vulnerability they want to get into, what kind of story they want to share. They're still, invited to participate in making a narrative of their life and making meaning of events in their life. But as far as what, how they start that and what meaning they want to make, that's really a process that they can opt into. We really offer a lot of vocabulary and language for students to share how they're feeling and to name the feelings that they are having and can imagine other people having. And that's another way that we hope to equip our students with the language in English to share and to empathize. But as far as, getting into their own prior trauma or ongoing trauma, a lot of that we really try to be very, very careful to let students opt in to what they want to share and when and how and to whom.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more to that, I think it should really it should be about, restoring agency, right? A lot of these the refugee communities, including myself and my family, we come from so much hardship and trauma that a lot of it is just really, I think, about restoring agency and nurturing dreams and reinstilling hope, and creating those safe spaces for self-expression. I think all of the solutions that were mentioned today and the objectives that were discussed today must be done with a deep sensitivity to trauma, while we still try to encourage hope and ambition and degrees and high test scores and all the things that we all want to strive for. I certainly know a thing or two about trauma and the ripple effects of it on myself and my family. And so creating those safe spaces, instead of focusing on what was lost, we can shift the narrative a little bit to what is possible, and encouraging conversations really around skills that can be built, passion that could potentially be fueled to making social change, and potential impact that these very, I think, resilient, powerful women can and will make once they do heal their traumas, rather than these rigid career paths that we often kind of see in the West. And so I just wanted to add a little bit more to that, and I know time is getting short here, but yeah.
I can share just a small word as well, even though I'm not a formal panelist. Farihah has put me on the spot. But a friend of mine shared something that really stands out to me, that life is long, but it is also short. And in that same way, time is long and it is short. And so to kind of continue with the things that Marie and Hannah, you mentioned, is going at the pace of the person in front of you. And I recognize that I'm speaking from the perspective of a therapist. So the client sitting in front of me, even if I know that they have a lot of trauma, if they have a lot of hardship that they have survived, not just, the fact that they're sitting in front of me is enough, like whether or not any words are exchanged. And so going at the pace and really recognizing the autonomy of the person in front of you, a lot of times, especially in the legal realm of at least the US, when seeking asylum or gaining the status of refugee, folks have to really, they have to have a declaration, they have to share their story, they have to complete forensic evaluations. And there's this feeling of forced, telling of your story. And so in whatever space we can, just creating a space where you are not forced to say anything, you can share it however much you want or feel comfortable. And recognizing that even if the person in front of you doesn't, maybe shares like one iota, or maybe you feel like I'm not getting anything from this person in front of me, recognizing that this could just be one step in their long journey. And there may be some time in the future when they look back to a small conversation they had with a volunteer or a mentor, and it helps them in the future. So I think I'll pause there.
Thank you, Aruba, for giving us the point of view from clinical practice. If anyone has any closing thoughts, I'm just going through the chat now where it's really great that we have audience members from the Netherlands. Hello to Morgana from the Netherlands, Vivek from India. Let's see, Dr. Mia Lung from Dallas. Hello to Aki Takada from the Japan ICU Foundation. Thank you for your work. So if anyone has any closing thoughts they can share, but if not, I can sort of offer some closing remarks.
Maybe Farihah, if I may just share my final closing remarks. I think, my final words would be, that we have to change the narrative on refugees, particularly women refugees and girls, because by investing in their education and empowerment, we are not just supporting an individual. As my colleague said, we are nurturing leaders, we're nurturing change makers. And I really liked how Marie said, not a survivor, but a driver. And also, I just would like to highlight, one thing, that this event was a success, because I just want to highlight what Aki Takada from Japan IUC Foundation said. And, we really thank for her supporting refugee students access higher education in Japan from Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. And she says now she will try to expand eligibility to Burmese and Rohingya refugees. So I think there's an outcome of this panel discussion. So thank you so much for everyone. It's great to learn from your insights and your experiences.
Wow, that's amazing. And from us, from First, we really just want to thank you all for this important conversation and sharing your perspectives. Education in all its forms truly has the power to transform lives. And the work that's being done here by all panelists to ensure access for women and girls is truly inspiring. So thank you so much for having us.
If I could just add, I know Hannah earlier mentioned something around sort of steering away from empowerment, but again, and I sort of added more to it later, is really about accessing that empowerment within ourselves. But I just really think that the key is to really move from charity to empowerment, right? To shift from temporary aid to equipping young girls and women with the tools, with the tools that they need to be self-sufficient, to break the cycle of dependency that I believe global aid organizations can unintentionally create, right? Not intentionally, unintentionally create. And everyone has something to give, right? Even if you feel like you don't have it to give now, when you do receive, you will give, whether it's time, knowledge, financial support. If it's not financial support, it's simply a commitment to advocacy. And so I do encourage everyone who's listening to us today, if it's not the former, everything that I mentioned, it's just advocacy, and that's using your word, your art. So I just want to leave folks with that.
Okay. All right. So I just posted in the chat some contact information. If anyone wants to share their contact information in the chat right now, feel free to do so. I just wanted to close up by saying thank you to each of our panelists who shared so many insights from their own work and life experiences. The work you do is invaluable and deserves to be highlighted and discussed. And thank you to all our audience members for joining from so many exciting places around the world. And I also want to say, of course, thank you to the Journalists and Writers Foundation for making this discussion possible and doing a lot of the unseen work. Thank you, Mehmet and Chemre. So please continue to follow along with the work that the panelists today that we had here are doing. And please do also look forward to RoVena's future initiatives as they relate to refugee education. Please follow us on Instagram. I shared the information. We're at RoVena.org. And we will also be sending out a follow-up email to all of the attendees for today. So please keep an eye out on that if you want to keep abreast of everything that is going to be going on. And unless anyone has any other final thoughts,
I just wanted to say I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your day and week. And for those who are celebrating this month, Ramadan Mubarak, and we look forward to joining you next time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.